verified credentials, verifiable credentials. We'll get into that. So I want to get through the introductions as quickly as possible. So we'll start with Rebekah. Just tell us who you are and what Numeracle does.
Yep. Hi, Rebekah Johnson, founder, CEO of Numeracle, and we're on a mission to restore trust in communication through identities.
Keep going, Matt. Yeah.
Very good. Matt, I'm head of products at TMTID. We bring together number intelligence and mobile identities to help business proof who I am at the point of entry and throughout the process of authentication.
Glyn Povah at Telefónica, so I look after our global product development for digital identity.
CTO for Secure ID, and we are building the missing identity layer for the internet.
And a special guest who's not up there, but some of you might recognise.
I'm Andrew Budd. I'm the founder and CEO of iProov. We do biometric identity verification and liveness checking, and we deliver verifiable credential infrastructure for identity providers.
And Andrew's here to disagree with the rest of the panel, we hope, on some things. So let's get into why we're here. So what's wrong with digital ID? Rebekah, I'll start with you first. Why are we here? What's broken about digital ID?
It's not fully adopted. There's varying versions of digital identity. We all continue to argue about it, so I think that's what's wrong currently with it. Really, from Numeracle's perspective, our role, I think all of us play different roles with identity, whether we're issuing identity, leveraging identity, securing identity, rendering identity. There's multiple roles within that process, and there is inconsistency in the network, and we also are focused on consumer identity versus business. And Numeracle for us, we're purely on the business identity side. So I'm actually kind of sitting on the sidelines watching and waiting for the dust to settle. But the way that we've approached identity, we can attach our identity to any model that gets developed.
Okay, so we have this situation where if you want to prove who you are online, you have millions of accounts and passwords you can't remember, and there's all sorts of phishing and stuff going on. So one of the proposed solutions to this nightmare is this whole area we're here to talk about, verifiable attributes or credentials. So let's just talk about what they are first of all. Matt, I don't know if you're the right person to ask, but what is a verifiable credential?
Sure. So, I mean, in many respects, it's an issued token, cryptographically secured, with personal information inside that you can choose to share in different ways. You can share the packet, you can share the attributes or features within it according to the need of the customer journey, business journey you're going through.
And what's in a credential? What's the consumer experience of a credential look like?
Well, it can vary because it could be, I mean, most common ones that we're seeing in the market right now is mobile driving licenses. We're seeing the creation of a digital version of that, being able to go with you wherever you go, and then being able to effectively break apart what's within that token, certificate, license to issue proof of verification, proof of authentication, relevant to anything from picking up a hire car to accessing or purchasing online goods.
Okay, Glyn, what does this do to solve the problem? How is it better than passwords and so on?
Well, I think just to extend what Matt was saying, and give an example, I've got a VC on my phone right here, right now, issued by Telefónica, so it's my phone number that Telefónica has taken, and they obviously are the issuer of the SIM card for that phone number, right? So if you think about the scale of this thing, you've got 6 billion, 7 billion SIM cards globally, managed by phone companies. They can be issuer of that mobile number as a verifiable credential, and it can sit on my wallet. What can I do with that? Well, for one thing, I can authenticate myself because you've got a cryptographically secure token then on my phone. But you can also do things like age verification, things like selective disclosure of that age, so I don't have to give away my date of birth. I can actually just prove I'm over 18, or in my case, actually over 50 now.
You look great.
But this is the power of this VC. So I think to bring it back to some practical applications.
Tell us about what you're doing at Telefónica and how much you've rolled out and what kind of use cases you have.
I mean, I think it's really early days. So I come from the API side. And we'll hear a lot in this show and this city about Open Gateway, about Kamara and the APIs, and that's my heritage of doing things like SIM swap APIs, number verification APIs so that we can verify the phone number in the network for authentication use cases, replacing SMS OTPs, I think, which is a message that's coming out more and more from the industry and certainly from the brands we work with. But Telefónica, I think, has a vested interest, as all telcos do. We are one of those few parties globally that have huge amounts of first-party data, right? I mean, how many global brands, if you think about us as an industry, have first-party data? Banks, yes. Governments, and then maybe telcos. Are there any others? Probably not so many.
So I want to come back to that very important area of SMS authentication and what might happen to that space if this space takes off. But Gautam, your background before Secure ID was operator APIs. You've seen a lot of them come and go, these proposed platforms. So what are your thoughts on what went wrong there and what role operator APIs might have in this emerging space?
Yeah, so can I quickly go back to, because we started to talk about what is the problem with digital identity, right? I think there is not much problem with digital identity because unless we see where the problem is, we may fix or we may find a solution. That solution may be somewhere else, right? What do I mean by that is the problem is not digital identity. The internet was never designed to identify humans. It was designed to identify computers, and that's why there are IP addresses, right? Fortunately or unfortunately, we humans do not have IP addresses, right? That's the problem, not digital identity. Just wanted to share that.
Okay.
Now coming back to what you asked for, yes, and it's great to see that there are multiple, let's say, initiatives that has happened over time, right? I remember from 2009, right? One API, then there was Wholesale Application Community WAC, if any of you remember. Then there was Joint Innovation Lab. Then Mobile Connect, which was my fault really, and then and yours as well. And then now we have a great momentum behind the Network API initiative from GSMA, Open Gateway. We have lots of very interesting joint ventures coming up. But I think the industry was missing what I call a Netscape movement, right? Right. And that's what is arriving right now, which is exciting. What do I mean by that is the web was invented in 1989, but there was no one who could actually use the web, because to use the web, you need a browser, a popular browser, right? So there was a browser, interestingly, it was called World Wide Web, without any space, but that was not usable. Then there was Mosaic, which came up in 1993. Still, it was very technical. The first popular browser which came up was Netscape Navigator. If I remember, I used it. That came up in '94, right? So that was the Netscape movement, and the industry was missing that. You need a popular supply of these, APIs. So right now, with the Open Gateway Initiative and Network API, I think that moment has arrived, where there is a balance between the demand and the supply is catching up as well. So I'm pretty excited on that, and we are doing our role. We are playing our role in there by providing the platform to bridge that.
So Andrew, this is
I'm just feeling a bit sorry for this audience because we've just leapt into some details of verifiable credentials without perhaps giving a moment of context. So I was going to just 2 minutes giving a moment of context because you asked about digital identity. Digital identity is basically nothing more than just a set of facts about a person. That's all it is. Historically, those facts have been, for digital identity, those facts have been assembled by a company, put into a filing cabinet. They have run and owned and operated this increasingly large, expensive and insecure filing cabinet, and any time a relying party like a bank or a shop wanted to know about this person, they would go to the filing cabinet. The filing cabinet's operator would authenticate the user, they'd open the drawers, rifle through the files, pull out the piece of information, and give it to the relying party. That is the way that digital identity has historically worked, and there are a number of problems with that. What this whole discussion about verifiable credentials is about is that this entire model is about to be utterly blown up and exploded. A whole new model is coming in which there will be no filing cabinets. Each one of us will carry our own file, our own dossier of facts around with us. And when the bank wants to know about you, the bank will ask an app on our phone called a wallet for information about us, and we will give it out. Inside our filing cabinet will be a number of facts which have been issued by somebody like a mobile operator or a biometric authentication provider and digitally signed by them, which the user's wallet will then hand out to the relying party. That signed fact is called a verifiable credential. It's a complete upheaval of the entire industry architecture. And if we say what's been wrong with digital identity as an industry, the problem is that nobody made any money out of it. We're sorry, you guys made money out of it, but we've got to be, and I'll shut up in a minute, but we've got to be very clear, because the other thing that's wrong about digital identity is that people get fantastically confused. Digital identities are a set of facts about people. The act of making sure that you are entitled to assert those facts is called authentication. SMS OTP actually has got nothing to do with our digital identity whatsoever, and everything to do with authentication. And the problem of authentication, which is a really, really, really serious and difficult to resolve problem, is separate from the problem of assembling and asserting facts. The challenge that we all have is that up until now there's been a nice monetization mechanism for authentication called SMS OTP. What verifiable credential does is to restructure the industry in such a way that potentially nobody makes any money at all.
I was going to add on that because I was waiting for someone to mention the money part, because that's exactly what it's about. So you have identities that are the consumers, and you have identities that are the businesses, or we can call them entities. Consumers just aren't going to pay for it. So I think that's been one of the biggest challenges. Why I say all these debates, like I go to the Silicon Valley little hubs here, and everyone's yelling about their credentials, Carrie, or it's just like all over the place. I'm like, who's paying for it? Oh, we'll talk about that later. So I don't even play in that space because I want to have a P&L that has a higher P than an L. So businesses are motivated when their identity is what's holding them back on communicating with consumers. So some of the advancements, and I'd be so curious from the Telefónica side, we launched in the US with T-Mobile the delivery of verified identities for businesses through StirShaken, through the passport. It now traverses the network, terminates into T-Mobile, and Apple, Motorola, and Samsung are rendering that data once it's been authenticated by the receiving carrier. And I would love see the next step be the consumer on their mobile device, that their identity carries through the network, and then when it hits into the call centers for the businesses, then that's rendered. Then we can start to have this little ping pong of trust that can go back and forth. But I will tell you, businesses will pay for it all day long.
I 100% agree with that. I mean, think about if you call into a call centre and you go through that horrible, process of all the KBA questions. What's your mother's maiden name? What colour socks did you wear when you were 5? All these kind of crazy questions. That's like a 2 or 3, 4 minute conversation. If you can cut that down to 30 seconds by sharing that consumer data, that verifiable credential into that call centre, cryptographically secure, there's your business case, right? But I'm glad we're talking about the economic model on this panel, because in the wider community it's not being talked about, and I think in the EIDAS community, in the European Digital Identity Wallet community, the economic model is missing, and I think that's a really big problem for me, because there's going to be a lot of government use cases for those European Digital Identity Wallets that are coming next year. And it's going to be great, a halo effect, I guess, but we need the businesses to come along too. I think it should have been at the beginning of that process, the economic conversations, not just the technology conversations.
Sorry to interrupt. For a change, let me disagree with you. Authentication, you can still make money, right? SMS OTP was authentication, and let's separate out authentication from identity verification, which you did as well. So SMS OTP is getting replaced by number verify, and you make money by number verify, right? As a community. But I think let's make it absolutely clear what commercial problem you're talking about, right? In the, let's say, traditional space, pre this verifiable credential, there is a value provider, there is a value consumer. So we used to call them identity provider, we still call them identity provider. Is the value provider, the value consumers are the relying parties, as you mentioned as well, right? So it's clear. Then how do you actually, monetize? The value provider provides the identity, and the value consumer basically consumes that, and then you count the number of transactions, off you go, right?
So let me just, I'm going to enjoy this. Let me disagree with that, because SMS OTP, the current model today, it has very clear economic actors, people that you can send invoices to, who are involved both in, as you say, in the creation of the identity, that is the guy with the filing cabinet, and the authentication of the identity. Funnily enough, that's also the person with the filing cabinet, or sometimes it's the relying party. Who do you sell SMS OTP to? You sell it to the bank. Traditionally, the relying party has done the authentication, and so therefore you'll be able to sell a business. In the verifiable credential model, the way it's going is that finishes, no more. The user authenticates themselves to their wallet, and then the authenticated certificate gets given to the bank. Now, well, that's very fine. You charge the customer for their own authentication. You charge them a bill every month for all the OTPs that they've received. No, you're not. That's never going to happen. So you've got a problem where, we have this problem because we authenticate people. We do facial authentication. So we do. If you go to Singapore, for example, every time you SingPass, you'll iProov yourself to do virtually anything in the economy. The reason they did that was that they had an SMS OTP scam that defrauded 1/4 of the population, and they went, that's not going to end well, so they got rid of it and replaced it by iProov. We have to get paid because we have costs, like SMS has costs, every time authentication takes place. In the new world of verifiable credentials, the problem you've got is that the bank is willing to pay, but the wallet is doing the authentication to the user. As Gautam says, right at the beginning, you've got somebody who issued the identity in the first place, which was a value-adding process, but they put the information into the wallet. How on earth is the relying party going to pay me or you as an SMS provider or Gautam as an information provider when the fundamental architecture that underlies verifiable credentials forbids the flows of information that would be necessary in order to raise those invoices?
Yeah, so again, maybe let's disagree again, right? So let's separate out, as I said earlier, I think you said as well, let's separate out authentication from identity attributes, right? So let's take the new scenario with verifiable credential. So it's not just the identity provider and the relying party, right? You have an issuer, you have the verifier, which traditionally were the relying parties. Now you have a new entity, which is the holder, the user. So the issuer issues the verifiable credential to the holder. Holder holds the identity data in their wallets, right? And the verifier gets the identity data from the holder's wallet, right? Now here is a commercial problem. I'll come to authentication. The problem is, in this entire transaction chain, the issuer is involved just once, right? Like if Telefónica is an issuer, it's involved just once. Why giving it to the holder's wallet, right? After that, the verifier, acting as the relying party, is getting it from the holder's wallet, right? So then how will the issuer get monetized? That's basically the problem, right? The other bigger problem is, who is the customer here, right? Is the user holder is the customer of the issuer? It's not, because then the user will have to pay, right? That doesn't make sense. So that basically is a commercial problem, right? Now coming back to how authentication can still be monetized, is there is a wallet, right? How does the user authenticates in the wallet, right? There is a wallet and there are verifiable credential there. Still, the user and the wallet is an application, right? How do you authenticate the user into that wallet? Traditionally, there used to be SMS OTP, user ID, password that everyone hits, then biometrics as well, right? Now, what you do, and everything is chargeable, right? SMS OTP was chargeable, biometrics you charge as well, right? Now what you do is, if you don't want to use SMS OTP, you use a cryptographic authentication, which is number verified, and which should be chargeable as well, and which is chargeable, I guess, as part of the network.
But that doesn't explain how the number verifier or the biometric provider gets paid, because there is no mechanism. So, I'm sorry, I don't want this to be arcane, but you've got to remember that verifiable credentials that this whole model is coming extremely fast towards you. By 2026, every European country has to have issued a digital identity wallet to their citizens under the EIDAS2 scheme. Well, that'll probably be a year late, but it'll be 2027. At that point, the world of every single one of our customers in Europe will find themselves in a completely new place. And this model is going to hit us in a couple of years' time. So this is not an academic debate at all.
And Andrew, I think part of the conversation, extracting out the technical element, privacy, is kind of the thing that holds it back. I think there needs to be another voice in this with regards to privacy is there to protect the individual that you're trying to issue these credentials out for. And we may have hit a pivot point where the privacy laws are going to end up causing more harm to the individual that we're trying to protect. And I think that needs to be discussed. I don't see it being mentioned, but we need to have some changes because everything that you're talking about is to deal within these limitations. And I think privacy is just outdated. And we need to make changes there to enable the technology.
Forgive me if I over-index my speaking, but again, for the audience, the reason why the relying party, the verifier, can't communicate commercially with the issuer is the whole model of verifiable credentials, exactly as you say, has been designed to assure absolute privacy. So anything that would involve the flow of economic information back is banned because this all comes out of my observation is it comes out of a libertarian movement in the United States in the mid-teens where privacy was absolutely supreme. What I find interesting, in fact the real reason why verifiable credentials are so powerful is that not so much that they protect privacy, because I think you're right, a lot of people actually don't care, but because it produces an infrastructure which is extremely resilient and extremely tamper-proof, which means that if you have hostile criminal or state actors, this model of verifiable credential, of decentralized identities, is far more resilient to attack and corruption than traditional identity models. So the real danger is that if we put in place an economic method that works, not that it violates users' privacy, although of course there will be some who are very concerned about that, but actually that it destroys the resilience and scalability of the system and makes it just a more complicated version with a more complicated way of doing ID with all the flaws of the historic method.
Okay, well, I've had loads of questions and I haven't answered any of them. And normally that makes me a very bad moderator because I've let everybody talk. But it's such a fascinating area, the monetization of this and what it might do to some of the incomes of a lot of people in this room. So I wanted to let people carry on talking. We haven't got that much time left, but before we came on, we were talking a little bit about generative AI and what impact that might have on this space. Because obviously this is an area that everyone's so interested in. So Gautam, can you just very quickly summarize what threat this might have?
Yes, so let's start with how generative AI is impacting phishing, right? If we all remember maybe a few years back, maybe 5-6 years back, you receive a phishing message, you look at it and say, I'm not going to interact with it because the language will be awful or there will be spelling mistakes, right? Then something happened which we call ChatGPT or the generative AI, and then these fraudsters have got access to the exact same tool. Now they started to create phishing messages using all these generative AI and large language models. There is actually a paper published in Archive, you can search for it. It says how to do phishing using ChatGPT. Anyway, so then these phishing messages started to become much more accurate, but it didn't stop there. We all are, happy to share all our personal details and all our cat videos and birthday celebrations in our social graph. So these fraudsters then are fine-tuning the large language models in the GenAI world with our own personal messages. So in that case, the phishing messages are not just accurate, they're very personal. But the problem is it doesn't just stop there, right? We were talking earlier, I was in a conference and one of my fellow speakers was a neuroscientist, and what he said is, basically, the reason many of the content become viral because apparently when you consume those, read or hear them, they increase the amount of dopamine and oxytocin in our blood level. He doesn't know why, but he knows what is going on, right? So these bad guys are then fine-tuning these large language models using this viral content so that the phishing messages are not just accurate, they are not just personal, they are making us emotional and we are acting on it, right? this is something that I call amygdala hijack. So Gen AI is actually almost hacking our brain and emotions, right?
Yeah. Rebekah, did you have something to add there?
I mean, I'm just going to say what I always say. AI will usher in the need for identity, full stop.
So what Gautam was talking about was, I mean, phishing fundamentally, the objective of phishing is fundamentally to do authentication takeover. Because yes, it gathers loads of personal information, but as I said, personal information is the stuff in your file. Until you can authenticate the user, it's actually worthless. People think personal information is somehow valuable, and some organizations use knowledge of personal information as an authentication method, and that is really dumb, as we now know. So what they're actually trying to do is to do authentication takeover, and certainly what we've developed is token flows and control over the applications to ensure that at some point you are able to protect the user against that kind of authentication flows. It's actually one of the reasons why Singapore and other organizations have stopped using OTP, because OTP is so vulnerable to social engineering based on phishing for takeover. Even biometrics, which is a very powerful tool, is still vulnerable. We have, over the last year, we published a couple of days ago our 2024 fraud report. There's a webinar that you can watch, which describes the exponential, and I mean that mathematically, use of AI to create living, breathing, moving, absolutely pixel-perfect facial representations of either victims or people who never lived in order to fool facial verification systems. AI has become exceptionally powerful at being anybody that the fraudster wants to be, beyond the ability of human beings to spot. We did a survey, we found 99.9% of people couldn't spot an AI-generated deepfake.
Amazing. It's terrifying. We've got 3 minutes, so if we've got a question from the audience before we wrap up. Anyone? Yeah, one question there.
My name is Greg Cohn. There's a joke in the crypto community that fixes this, and it's said about nearly everything. Haven't heard that mentioned on this panel, and I'm just curious, is there a decentralized model that, despite commercial challenges, could work?
Matt, we haven't heard any from you, so I don't know if you've got anything to say. I'm conscious that
I would just give a quick answer on that, which extends, I think, what Andrew was saying just now is, actually verifiable credentials was born out of the self-sovereign identity, purist view of the world, libertarian view of the world, and I think that's why it doesn't have an economic model, because it was a cult almost. And I think, we need to get away from cults and more back into the business world, so that'd be my comment.
Just want to add in there is, you said in the crypto world, right? So for me as a technologist, crypto means cryptography, right? That's the power of blockchain. So there is a cryptographic engine in hardware that we all carry, all the time with us. That's the SIM, right? That's the solution. So yes, cryptography is the solution, not just blockchain. Right? Yeah. And that's exactly what we all are trying to do in the industry.
I'll just add on, actually Numeracle has a patent on verified identities using blockchain. And it's a private, so you can have a private node or a public node. The challenge is getting everyone to adopt it and participate. So I can set up my own little database and be happy in it, but still have to extend data out that goes outside of it. So trying to adopt participants into like a private node was challenging. And I think I kind of quit talking about it when the NSA kept showing up at our conferences. It's like, I think I'm done. It's like backing away. But I was a believer about 8 years ago or so, and just couldn't get anybody to go along in the cult.
Can I just say, blockchain adds no value whatsoever to the task of authentication, although it just doesn't, because it's a way of distributing information. I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that under EIDAS 2, the European Union has decided that it's going to do decentralized identity using DNS. Not blockchain. Ultimately, blockchain is just a publishing and distribution mechanism, and DNS, what works just as well. But it doesn't. Blockchain doesn't address in itself any of the challenges that present digital identity today.
Well, thank you so much for making my life so easy here. I think that's the only thing. So, Rebekah, Matt, Glyn, Gautam, Andrew, thank you for your contributions, and on to the next session. Thank you.